Hi, this is Gary Reinecke. I want to thank you for taking out some time to be with us today. I have two special guests I want to introduce who have unique experiences in disciple making. First, I'll introduce Micah Dodson. Micah's been a church planter, has started 2 churches as the lead church planter in the Pacific Northwest. Hi, Micah.
Hey, Gary. Great to be with you today.
Thank you. And then from Brisbane, Australia, I've invited Colin Noyes to join us, who's an authority on disciple-making movements and has authored 3 books on the topic. I'll give more of both of their backgrounds below in the blog, but I want to invite Colin to respond to this question: why does disciple-making begin in the harvest?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Gary. Let me just quickly give you the framework of my paradigm. One is I live in Australia. Australia is a post-Christian nation. I think second, and very importantly, I'm a disciple of Jesus. I'm not a volunteer in a non-profit organization called the church. I look to Jesus first. I look to the pre-Constantinian church second, and occasionally I'll look to the modern church. So to the question, why does discipleship begin in the harvest? I believe that's where Jesus started. He worked with people the Father guided him to. Somewhere in that journey, those people made a commitment in their lives to him. It's the fact that they were journeying with him and towards him. And as you go about your normal life, make disciples. Pre-Constantinian church worked in the harvest because they were an incredibly small group in a pagan world. Not that dissimilar to the world in which I live in. In the early church, disciple making was part of the normal life of a believer. This is why the church grew so quickly in the first 2 to 3 centuries. The post-Constantinian church was based on the thinking of Aristotle. And so it became much more of an institutional rather than a relational. And so it lost some of the key factors that were part of that early church. Today, less and less people identify with the modern church. My experience is that they are really interested in Jesus, and they're interested in what he said and what he can say into their lives. The post-Constantinian church has to be obedient to Jesus and to look back to this early church time if it's going to move forward. But to come at discipleship in the way in which the modern church does simply doesn't connect with the postmodern world.
And there's so much there. We're going to highlight some of those points in the blog below. But Micah, would you respond to the same question? Why does disciple making begin in the harvest?
I look at it from some of the pragmatic context of today, what some have called the disappearing church, and the reality that we're in a post-Christian age, that fewer and fewer people are attending church. And I think that discipleship has become much more about assimilating people into a church with that come to us approach in past generations, and less about going where people are and orienting our lives around people who don't yet know Jesus. In fact, there's this kind of strange thing that has emerged where there's people in Christian subculture that literally don't know people who don't know Christ. What I believe Christ intended, he always intended that we would look for every opportunity to make the most of those conversations that we could have with people who don't know Christ. We're thinking of Peter's reference to, being ready to give the reason for the hope that you have. And so I think of it more from the perspective of we have to live in proximity to people who don't know Christ, and people aren't coming to church like they used to in past generations, and in many ways are inoculated from the gospel or the experience of coming to the church. And we need to look for ways to empower people to go out and make disciples.
There are so many good points that you bring out, Micah. What I'd like to do is invite conversation below in the blog on some of the key points that I'll mention in the text below. Thanks so much for your time today, Micah and Colin. Look forward to staying in touch.